Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt in Studio West, joined by Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy. Admiral Montgomery, thank you for coming back so soon. I know you're probably a little bit jet lagged from your return trip from Taiwan. I'll talk to you about that in a second. But first, Friday night was interesting at the Pentagon. The president dismissed the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the chief of naval operations, the vice chair of the Air Force. What was your reaction to that?
Well, I was disappointed, frankly, Hugh. I mean, I know all three officers very well, particularly Lisa Franchetti, the head of the CNO. I knew her to be a true warfighter and a good leader of the Navy. I don't know the dynamics behind it, but I was somewhat disappointed because I had a lot of respect and support for her.
Now, the president is commander in chief, so he immediately gets to go and move and replace, and he has replaced the chair, and he gets to replace the CNO. What ought he to be looking for in a new CNO, Mark Montgomery?
So I agree. By the way, I agree with you completely. Particularly on the chairman, the president has to have someone he really trusts and enjoys, listening to. I mean, he has a repertoire with an ability. Otherwise, what's the value in a trusted advisor? So fully get it. So as you look at the CNO, I think it's an interesting time. Our mutual friend, Dr. Jerry Hendricks, would say we need a strategist. I would just say at this point, uh, the Navy, it's interesting for the Navy to have a strategy. The Department of Defense has a strategy. What we really need somebody is somebody who can turn the Secretary Hegseth's strategy, as he lays it out, into requirements, and then those requirements into forces. And so we're going to really need somebody that understands the requirements process and understands how to turn a strategic demand signal that'll come from the COCOMs once they read the secretary's strategy into actual requirements. And so I think for that, you're going to have someone who, in the short term, is innovation. In other words, from 2025 to 2030, we have the Navy we have. So the person's got to be an innovator who knows how to take the forces we have and twist them, those circles into those circles into square blocks of the requirement that's asked for. But then the person then has to kind of use the other side of their brain to be a requirements driven, a detail oriented person that looks at the Navy that for 2035 to 2040 and says, shipyards, you have to do X, you have to do Y, and mercilessly rides them and grinds out a shipbuilding plan that meets the Navy for that. So these are two very different skill sets. And I guess if they had a third thing, Hugh, it is that they have like a Department of the Treasury currency printer in their basement, because
Huh.
this is going to take a ton of money. And, so really what I mean is this, the third quality is they have to be an articulate, um, eloquent
Proponent?
proponent of the Navy, and in a way that we may not have had in the last 20 years.
Let me ask you, Admiral. There was an article by our friend Jerry Hendricks, How Eisenhower Reshaped the Joint Chiefs and the U.S. Military Strategy. He wrote it a year ago, and I read it a year ago, and I was reminded of it. And I came in and got rid of all five, I think it was four at the time, members of the Joint Chiefs over a year and a half. Well, Trump has half as much time as Eisenhower had, so he's moving twice as fast. Then I went and found Andrew Roberts in his book Masters and Commander, and I want to play for you a bit about how George Marshall approached dealing with FDR and see if it doesn't resonate with you. Cut number one.
Roosevelt conducted his own discussions on military strategy, sometimes without reference to Marshall, who resented it, but who saw that the president, charming, organizationally haphazard, brilliant, and extremely wily, needed very careful handling. An early insight into the way that Marshall did this is afforded by a private letter he wrote on the 22nd of November 1939 to Major General Asa Singleton, Commandant of the Infantry School, with suggestions for how to manage the president's forthcoming visit there. Whatever arrangement is made, Marshall counseled, no one press him to see this or that, or understand this or that. Whatever is furnished him in the way of data should be on one sheet of paper, with all high-sounding language eliminated, and with very pertinent paragraphed underlined headings. If anything needed to be explained, a little sketch of ordinary page size is probably the most effective method, as he is quickly bored by papers, lengthy discussions, and by anything short of a few pungent sentences of description. You
What
have
do
to...
you What do you think of that, Admiral?
First, I would die for a boss like that. So he had it just listen. That describes how I understand briefing President Trump is.
Yes.
Short words, a picture, and of course the military will screw this up. We'll do what's called an OV1, which is a picture with 75 objects in it, and
Yeah.
impossible to understand. But a simple picture, so a description. I think that I think General Milley knew how to do that early in his work with President Trump. Obviously, near the end, it soured a bit. Yeah. So whoever is the chairman is going to have to be very skilled at taking what the military considers very complex issues and distilling them into simple lines of effort that the president can approve or disapprove and move forward.
So I'm hoping the CNO is a very good communicator with people like FDR and Trump, who just do not have time for the details. Trump's a visual guy. I gather FDR was a visual guy as well. And you deal with what the hands that you're dealt, right?
No, I agree, and that's why both of us hit on that. The idea that the person has to be this eloquent. You said proponent. That's exactly it. And I go beyond that because the Congress is a tough nut to crack too, because they're anchored in the thing that's built in their district, and you've got to pull them out of that and say, here's the big picture, how your district, what's built in your district, fits into it, which might not be the 23 ships you want, but instead 19. But that allows us to do something over here. So, and finally, we've never made the argument to the American people for the Navy we need. And that argument has to be made by the new CNO.
That's what I didn't want to put words in your mouth. I'm glad to hear you say that. What about deep select or off of the bench off of the beach? Because he went and got the new chairman from retirement. And the last time, I don't know who got Admiral Gilday, was a deep select. What do you make of both of those options?
I like the idea. If they want to go deep, I'm not a big fan of pulling a retired officer at this point. I think the right answer, I know several 3-stars right now that would be fantastic CNOs. And I think they could pull them off the bench if they wanted to do this job. I don't think they should we have a COCOM out there. Sam Paparo is fantastic.
No.
Not pull him from there. I think that's a mistake. So in this case, I would go down. There's a couple great officers. I don't want to say their names and jinx them, but I think that they could absolutely do that. And at this point, you might as well go for your Arleigh Burke moment. And as I said,
why don't you explain what that is? What's an Arleigh Burke moment?
Arleigh Burke was pulled very junior from the list, I think, as a 2-star into being chief of naval operations, a 4-star billet. So he jumped several hundred people, including my grandfather's, just in the full disclosure. So he was a very good selection for the Navy. I believe he ended up doing 6 years, our longest.
Marshall
terms.
jumped dozens of people more senior, and at least 5 who thought they were ahead of him in real terms, even though he was the vice chair. Admiral, before we go to Taiwan, I'm going to keep you during the break. Secretary Hegseth ran down his list of, I need an 8% cut, and everyone's got a cut, but we need our Virginia class. That was good. We need our Pacific assets. That was good. He didn't include the Columbia class, and I kind of was shocked. Don't we have to have the Columbia class?
I think that's almost, look, I'm going to put that in the it's a given category.
Okay, go ahead.
And so, but I'll also tell you, it's not an 8% cut. It's an 8% reshaping.
Right.
It's important to understand that. And that's the important part, is that you make these reductions so that you can invest the money where you decide you really need it for the threat you're facing tomorrow through the 2035 timeframe.
All right, a minute to the break, and we'll go into the break, Admiral. How long did you spend in Taiwan, and who did you talk to before you tell us what you heard?
So I was there about a week, and I talked to the president, vice president, national security advisor, minister of defense, foreign minister, the U.S. forces leader there, the opposition leader, the KMT, and a few other opposition legislators. So the whole kit and caboodle.
So I guess you're never going to China again.
I am certainly not. I'm trying to get banned from China. I'm banned from Russia, Azerbaijan. I'm working Iran, and I'm working China.
Well, stand by. Admiral Montgomery is going to tell us the takeaways We got 5 minutes. He can give us as many takeaways as he can during the break. I'll put it onto the podcast. I am back with Admiral Mark Montgomery, just back from Taiwan. Admiral, take it away for 4 minutes. What are the takeaways from your trip to Taiwan?
So the biggest issue they have right now is getting their defense spending up to 3%. President Trump has made that abundantly clear. That is, that to get the door open to the U.S. partnership to continue the way it has, they've got to come up to that level. Last year was about 2.55%. Well, they've got a small problem. Their current budget of about 2.5 or 2.6% is actually being held up in the legislature. They have a split legislature. The DPP party, which has been in charge of the presidency for the last 8 years, won the election a year ago, so they've got another 4-year term. But they lost the legislature to the KMT with a third party. So the KMT has been blocking parts of the defense budget and freezing it so that it would actually take it all the way down to like 2.2 or 2.1% if you count for they have to fix two things. First, they have to fix the freeze. They have to get the regular budget approved at 2.5%. Then they have a special budget, and they knew they were going to have this all along, that with about a 0.5% plug. To do that special budget, and the reason they're waiting for it is they have to have U.S. things to buy. Only one country in the world sells them any. I mean, they buy their own stuff, and they buy stuff from us. And so you've heard me talk before about the foreign military sales program being a donkey that is way behind schedule and very slow. We have a backup of $10+ billion of foreign military sales to Taiwan, and they're about to order another $8 billion. So it's a backed up program. We've got to get some of these pushed forward, so by April or May they can put them under order, and then get this other 0.5% in. And so it's a double whammy good for President Trump. Not only did we add that 0.5% and get to 3%, but it's all stuff we're buying from your defense industrial base. Win-win.
Why don't we do that? I mean, why have we not delivered what they've already paid for?
Sir, it is shocking to me. Like, I studied these systems, and there's a fellow here named Brad, senior fellow here, Brad Bowman, who does this with me. We've looked at like Javelins. They ordered them in 2015. We delivered them in 2022. Stingers, we ordered them in 2015. They delivered them in 2023. I mean, these are 7 or 8 years for things that should take 1 or 2 years, not that long. So that's the first problem. The second problem is we just are so bureaucratic in the doing this. We have not figured out how to streamline this process, and we don't have a prioritization list appropriately. Congress has ordered it. You're starting to finally see a little bit of that, but it's coming in, after the fact here, very late.
I got a quick question for Admiral. Last week in an interview with Catherine Herridge, Secretary Rubio mentioned our allies who don't want to be tributary states: Japan, Australia, Philippines, South Korea, even Vietnam. He did not mention Taiwan. Was that an Atchison moment, or is that another given?
I hope it was a accident, an Atchison moment where he did not mean to exclude, in that case, Korea, but in this case, Vietnam. Excuse me, Taiwan. I got stuck in between the two wars. My take is that Secretary Rubio has been a strong supporter of Taiwan for 20 years or 16 years. I think that was an error. Look, we're there. They are nervous, though. I will tell you that their concern with CCP is about a 9 out of 10. The Taiwans, their concern with the incoming Trump administration is probably a 7 out of 10. And part of it is that on occasion, President Trump, and I think it's rhetoric.
I got to go. Tough. Thank you, Admiral Montgomery.